The kiss was supposed to save her. Instead, it destroyed everything. Zara's pulse thundered in her ears as she stood frozen in the middle of the Azure's gleaming dining room, the taste of a stranger's lips still burning on her mouth. Around her, 100 conversations had died into suffocating silence. Crystal glasses hung suspended midair. Forks hovered over $50 appetizers. Every eye in Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant was locked on her, the waitress who'd just committed career suicide by kissing a customer at the bar. But it was the look on Marcus's face that made her blood run cold. Not anger, not jealousy. Something worse. Recognition. Horror. His face had drained of all color, his mouth hanging open like she'd just signed her own death warrant. Because the stranger whose arm was still wrapped around her waist, whose cologne still filled her lungs, whose heartbeat she could feel against her back. That stranger had dark blue eyes that she suddenly recognized. Eyes she'd seen before, on magazine covers, on the wall in the staff break room, on the signature at the bottom of every paycheck she'd cashed for 2 years. Dominic Ashford, her boss, the billionaire owner of the entire restaurant empire she worked for. The man who could destroy her career with a single word. And she'd just kissed him, desperately, publicly, in front of everyone. His fingers tightened on her waist, and when he leaned down to whisper in her ear, his voice was dark velvet wrapped around a blade. "Don't run, not yet. We're not done with this performance." Zara's knees threatened to buckle, because she'd just dragged a billionaire into her mess. And from the dangerous smile playing on his lips, the one that promised chaos and ruin and something far more terrifying than either, he was about to drag her into his. This wasn't salvation. This was the beginning of the end. If you want to know how a single desperate kiss turned into the most dangerous game of pretend ever played, you need to subscribe right now. Hit that button, because what's about to happen will leave you absolutely breathless, and missing even 10 seconds of this story would be a crime. Drop a comment immediately and tell us where you're watching from and what time it is in your world right now. Are you in Chicago at midnight, Miami at sunrise, Tokyo pulling an all-nighter? We want to know. And here's the real question, the one that's going to haunt you. Would you kiss a complete stranger to save yourself from humiliation? Because Zara just did. And it's going to cost her everything she thought she knew about love, power, and who she really is. Let's rewind 6 hours. 6 hours before that kiss that would change everything. Zara Coleman was tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep could fix, but the bone-deep exhaustion that came from working double shifts for 2 straight years. At 26, she'd already lived 3 lifetimes. The first ended when her mother died, leaving behind a mountain of medical debt that no daughter should have to carry. The second ended 6 months ago when Marcus, her boyfriend of 3 years, the corporate lawyer she'd stupidly thought she'd marry, cheated on her with Simone St. James, a woman whose Instagram bio literally said luxury lifestyle influencer. Now she was living her third life, the survival one, the one where she smiled through every shift at the Azure, one of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurants, serving people who spent more on a single bottle of wine than she made in a month. The one where she went home to her studio apartment in Washington Heights and collapsed into bed with her uniform still on because she was too exhausted to change. But Zara had a dream. Culinary school. Her own restaurant someday. A place that served her grandmother's West African recipes mixed with her mother's Southern soul food. A place that smelled like home. That dream was the only thing that kept her moving through the fog of grief and exhaustion and crushing debt. Tonight was supposed to be like any other Thursday. Take orders, smile pretty, collect tips, survive. Except at 6:47 p.m., Marcus walked through the Azure's front doors with Simone on his arm, and he specifically requested Zara's section. The host, Danny, had the decency to look apologetic when he told her. "Table 12. I'm sorry, Z. I tried to give it to Jessica, but he asked for you specifically." Zara's stomach dropped. She knew exactly what this was. Marcus had a cruel streak a mile wide, and this was his final performance. The ultimate power move, making her serve him and his new woman at the most expensive restaurant in the city. She straightened her shoulders, smoothed down her black uniform dress, and painted on the professional smile she'd perfected over 2 years of dealing with entitled customers. If he wanted a show, she'd give him one. She'd be so professional, so perfect, that he'd choke on his own pettiness. "Good evening," she said when she reached table 12, her voice steady despite the earthquake happening in her chest. "Welcome to the Azure. Can I start you off with something to drink?" Marcus leaned back in his chair like he owned the place, his arm draped possessively around Simone's shoulders. "Zara, wow, still here, huh? Still waiting tables?" The condescension in his voice was a slap. Simone at least had the grace to look uncomfortable, her light brown eyes flicking away. "I'll have the Dom Perignon 2012, Marcus continued, not waiting for Zara to respond. "We're celebrating. Simone and I just got engaged." There it was, the knife sharp and precise, right between the ribs. Zara's smile didn't waver. "Congratulations. I'll get that champagne right away." She turned on her heel, her movements controlled and graceful, and walked straight to the bar. Her hands were shaking so badly she had to grip the edge of the polished wood to steady herself. The humiliation was a physical thing, hot and choking, crawling up her throat. "You okay, Zara?" The voice was low, smooth, concerned. She looked up and met the dark blue eyes of the man who'd been sitting at the bar for the past hour. He came in a few times a week, always alone, always dressed casually in dark jeans and simple shirts that somehow looked expensive, despite their simplicity. He tipped 40% without fail and actually made eye contact when he ordered, which made him a unicorn in her world. She didn't even know his name. The reservation was always under Ashford, but that could have been his first name or last name or the name of his company for all she knew. "I'm fine," she lied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Just a rough table." He studied her for a long moment, and something in his expression shifted. Not pity, understanding maybe. "The couple at table 12? How did you? I've been watching you all night. You smile at every customer except them. And when you walked away from their table just now, you looked like you wanted to put your fist through a wall." Despite everything, Zara almost laughed. "That obvious?" "Only to someone who's paying attention." He took a sip of his whiskey, his gaze steady on hers. "Ex-boyfriend?" "Ex-boyfriend who just announced his engagement to the woman he cheated on me with. And he came here specifically to make sure I knew about it." The stranger's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "That's exceptionally cruel." "That's Marcus." Danny appeared behind the bar with the champagne, and Zara's brief moment of respite evaporated. She had to go back to that table, had to smile and pour their champagne and congratulate them on their future together, while her own present felt like it was crumbling. She delivered the champagne with mechanical precision. Marcus made a show of popping the cork himself, standing up so the whole restaurant could see, pulling Simone to her feet and kissing her deeply, while other diners clapped politely. "Zara!" Marcus said loudly, making sure his voice carried. "You should bring us 2 glasses. Actually, make it 3. You should toast with us. For old time's sake." It was the final humiliation, the ultimate power play, and Zara felt something inside her snap. She looked across the restaurant, and her eyes locked with the stranger at the bar. He was watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. And in that moment, something wild and reckless took over. She walked straight to the bar, her heart pounding, her mind screaming that this was insane. This was career suicide. This was absolutely unhinged. But she didn't stop. The stranger watched her approach, his expression unreadable. "I need you to do something for me," Zara whispered urgently. "Something crazy." "How crazy?" "Kiss me. Right now. Make it look real." His eyes widened slightly. "Your ex? Please. I just need him to think I've moved on. That I'm not pathetic. That I'm not still." Her voice cracked. She didn't get to finish the sentence because the stranger made his decision. He stood, set down his whiskey glass, and cupped her face in his hands. His palms were warm, slightly calloused, steady. "Follow my lead," he murmured. And then he kissed her. It wasn't a tentative kiss. It wasn't a polite performance. It was deep and consuming and absolutely convincing. His lips were soft but firm, moving against hers with a confidence that made her knees weak. Her hands came up instinctively to grip his shirt, and for a moment she forgot this was fake. Forgot about Marcus, forgot about everything except the taste of whiskey on his tongue and the way his thumb stroked her cheekbone. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, the restaurant had gone quiet. Every eye was on them. The stranger kept one arm around her waist and turned to face the dining room, his expression calm and possessive. "Sorry for the disruption, everyone. Sometimes you just can't wait to kiss the woman you love." Zara's brain was malfunctioning. Her lips were tingling. Her heart was trying to escape her chest. Marcus was staring at them, his face a mask of shock and fury. Simone looked between them with wide eyes. The stranger guided Zara back toward table 12, his hand warm and solid on her lower back. When they reached Marcus, he extended his free hand with easy confidence. "Dominic," he said simply, "Zara's boyfriend. And you are?" Marcus recovered quickly, his lawyer instincts kicking in. He shook Dominic's hand, his grip aggressive. "Marcus Chen, Zara's ex. I didn't know she was seeing anyone." "Well, she likes to keep her private life private," Dominic said smoothly. "Can't say I blame her. But congratulations on your engagement. Zara mentioned you two were close once." The dismissiveness in his tone was surgical. Marcus bristled. "How long have you two been together?" Simone asked, and there was genuine curiosity in her voice. Zara's mind was blank. She had no answer. She just kissed a complete stranger, and now she was supposed to. "3 months," Dominic answered without missing a beat. "Best 3 months of my life." He looked down at Zara, and the expression on his face was so tender, so genuine, that for a second she almost believed him. "We should get back to our dinner," Dominic continued. "But again, congratulations. Zara, I'll wait for you at the bar until your shift ends." She managed to nod, still in shock. He kissed her forehead, a gentle gesture that somehow felt more intimate than the kiss itself, and walked back to the bar. Zara stood frozen for a moment before her professional training kicked back in. She smiled at Marcus and Simone. "Enjoy your champagne." The rest of her shift passed in a blur. Marcus and Simone left quickly, Marcus's face tight with confusion and anger. The other servers kept shooting her curious glances, and Dominic stayed at the bar, true to his word, nursing his whiskey, and occasionally looking up to catch her eye across the room. When her shift finally ended at 11 p.m., Zara's entire body was vibrating with adrenaline and mortification. She'd kissed a customer. She'd probably gotten herself fired. She'd definitely lost her mind. She approached the bar slowly, her apron balled up in her hands. "I am so sorry," she began. "That was completely inappropriate and insane, and I understand if you want to report me or—" "Breathe," Dominic said calmly. He stood, pulling out his wallet. "How about we go somewhere and talk? Somewhere that's not here. I can't ask you to—" "You're not asking. I'm offering." His smile was gentle. "There's a dive bar 3 blocks from here. Best whiskey in Manhattan, worst decor. My treat. Unless you'd rather go home and spend the night replaying that disaster in your head." He had a point. 20 minutes later, they were sitting in a booth at Murphy's, a gloriously dingy Irish pub that smelled like beer and fried food. Zara had changed out of her uniform into jeans and a sweater. Dominic looked exactly the same, except he'd rolled up his sleeves, revealing forearms that were distractingly well-muscled. "I kissed you," Zara said, staring at her whiskey like it held answers. "I kissed a complete stranger to make my ex jealous. That's psychotic behavior." "It's creative problem-solving," Dominic countered. "And for the record, that was the most interesting thing that's happened to me in months." She finally looked at him. Really looked at him. He had dark brown hair that was slightly too long, dark blue eyes that seemed to see right through her, and a face that was handsome in a lived-in way. Not pretty, but compelling. There was a small scar above his left eyebrow and laugh lines around his eyes. "Why did you help me?" she asked. He was quiet for a moment, swirling his whiskey. "Because I've been watching you for weeks and you're always kind, even to the customers who treat you like you're invisible. You remember orders, you laugh at bad jokes, you make people feel welcome. And tonight, I watched someone try to humiliate you in the most public way possible. And I thought, he paused, I thought you deserved better. You deserve to walk away with your head high. Something in Zara's chest cracked open. Thank you, she whispered. They talked until 2 in the morning. Zara told him about Marcus, about the cheating, about how his family had never accepted her because she was just a waitress. She told him about her mother, about the debt, about her dreams of culinary school. Dominic listened with complete attention, asking questions, never once checking his phone or looking away. He told her he worked in the restaurant business, that he understood the industry. He was vague about the details, but Zara was too emotionally exhausted to press. When they finally left Murphy's, standing on the sidewalk in the cool October air, Dominic looked at her seriously. When's the wedding? Marcus's wedding. Next month. Martha's Vineyard. His family's throwing it. They sent me an invitation. Can you believe that? An actual invitation. Go. Zara laughed bitterly. Absolutely not. Go with me, as your boyfriend. Let's finish what we started tonight. She stared at him. You can't be serious. Completely serious. Look, I don't know Marcus, but I know men like him. Men who need to prove they won. The only way to truly walk away from that is to show him you've moved on to something better. And he smiled, I make a very convincing boyfriend. This is insane. I don't even know you. So get to know me. We have a month. Let me help you, Zara. She should have said no. Should have walked away from this beautiful, mysterious stranger and his impossible offer. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw something she desperately needed. Someone who saw her not as a victim, not as a waitress, not as less than, but as someone worth fighting for. Okay, she heard herself say. Okay, let's do it. Dominic's smile could have lit up the entire city. And that's how it started. A desperate kiss, a fake boyfriend, and a lie that was about to spiral into something neither of them could control. But here's what Zara didn't know as she walked home that night, her lips still tingling, her heart still racing. That stranger, Dominic, he wasn't just some guy who worked in restaurants. He was Dominic Ashford, the billionaire who owned the Azure and 46 other restaurants across the country. The man whose signature was on every single one of her paychecks. And he'd been coming to that bar, to her section, for 3 months. Not to check on his investment, but to see her, because Dominic Ashford, one of the richest men in New York, had fallen in love with his waitress. And now she just agreed to be his fake girlfriend. What could possibly go wrong? The next 3 weeks were the strangest, most intoxicating days of Zara's life, and she had absolutely no idea she was living a lie inside a lie. Dominic called her the next morning. Not texted, called. His voice was warm and steady over the phone, like they'd known each other for years instead of hours. So, he said, if we're going to convince your ex that we're madly in love, we need to actually know each other. Coffee? Today? They met at a small cafe in the West Village, tucked away on a cobblestone street that looked like it belonged in a movie. Dominic was waiting outside when she arrived, hands in his pockets, that same easy smile on his face. He was wearing a dark gray sweater and jeans that fit him perfectly, and Zara's traitorous heart did a little flip. Over lattes and croissants, they traded stories. He asked about her childhood in Atlanta, about her grandmother's cooking, about the moment she knew she wanted to work with food. She asked about his work, and he told her he'd started in the restaurant business young, worked his way up, understood what it meant to build something from nothing. It was all technically true. He just left out the part where working his way up meant inheriting a $50 million restaurant empire from his father at 25 and turning it into a $1 billion operation by 30. What about family? Zara asked. You never mentioned them. Something flickered across Dominic's face. My mother, Vivian, she's formidable. Old money, old values, very invested in maintaining certain standards. My father died when I was 24. Heart attack. Since then, my mother's made it her life's mission to see me properly married to someone from the right background. The right background, Zara repeated slowly. Meaning? meaning someone whose family name appears in the society pages, someone who went to the right schools, knows the right people, looks good in family photographs. His jaw tightened. Someone who's more of a business acquisition than a partner. Zara thought about Marcus's family, about the way they'd looked at her like she was something stuck to their shoe. I know that feeling. Their eyes met, and something passed between them. Understanding, recognition. Two people who'd been judged and found wanting by people who thought wealth and pedigree mattered more than character. Over the next week, Dominic took her to dinner 3 times. Small places, he said. Neighborhood spots where they could relax. Except every small place was a Michelin-starred restaurant where the chef came out personally to greet Dominic by name. Zara noticed but assumed he was just well-connected in the industry. A successful restaurant consultant, maybe. Someone who knew people. She had no idea that he owned half the restaurants they visited. He was careful, so careful. He paid in cash, never let her see a credit card with his full name. When people deferred to him, he played it off as professional courtesy. And Zara, exhausted from double shifts and focused on her own survival, didn't press. What she did notice was how he made her feel, like she mattered, like her opinions were important. When she talked about her dream restaurant, he didn't patronize or dismiss. He asked detailed questions about her menu concepts, her vision, her timeline. He took notes on his phone, his face serious and engaged. "You're going to do this," he said one night over wine at a tiny Italian place in Brooklyn. "You're going to build your restaurant, and it's going to be extraordinary." "You can't know that," Zara said, but she was smiling. "Yes, I can, because I've watched you work, Zara. I've seen the way you care about every detail, every customer. That kind of passion? It's rare. It's what separates good restaurants from legendary ones." The way he said it, with such absolute conviction, made her believe it too. 2 weeks before the wedding, Dominic showed up at her apartment at 10 p.m. on a Tuesday. She opened the door in her pajamas, an old Howard University t-shirt and shorts, her hair wrapped in a silk scarf. "We need to practice," he said, holding up a bottle of wine. "Practice what?" "Being a couple. We need to know each other's quirks, our habits. What if someone asks what you drink in the morning? What's on my nightstand? What movie makes you cry?" So they sat on her lumpy couch, sharing the wine, and they practiced. She learned that he took his coffee black with 1 sugar, that he read biographies of chefs and restaurateurs before bed, that he had a scar on his collarbone from a kitchen accident when he was 16, back when he thought he wanted to be a chef instead of running restaurants. He learned that she was a tea person, Earl Grey with honey, that she cried during The Notebook, even though she pretended she didn't, that she had a whole notebook filled with recipes from her grandmother that she was terrified to cook because what if she got them wrong? What if she couldn't recreate the magic? "You will," Dominic said softly, "because the magic wasn't just in the food, Zara. It was in the love she put into it, and you have that. I see it every time you talk about cooking." They were sitting close now, the wine bottle empty between them. The city lights filtering through her window, casting shadows across his face. Zara could smell his cologne, something clean and expensive that made her want to lean closer. "Dominic," she whispered. "Yeah? Thank you for doing this, for helping me. You don't even know me, not really, and you're doing all of this just to—" "I do know you," he interrupted, his voice low and intense. "Maybe not everything yet, but I know the parts that matter. I know you're kind. I know you work harder than anyone I've ever met. I know you have dreams that scare you because they mean so much. I know you laugh at terrible jokes, and you remember everyone's name, and you—" He stopped, swallowing hard. "You make me feel like a person instead of a position." The air between them was electric. Zara's heart was hammering against her ribs. His eyes dropped to her lips, and for one breathless moment, she thought he was going to kiss her for real this time. Not for show, not for Marcus, just because he wanted to. But he pulled back, clearing his throat, putting careful distance between them. "It's late," he said, his voice rough. "I should go." He left quickly, and Zara sat alone in her apartment, her skin still tingling from almost, her mind spinning with confusion and want. and the terrifying realization that she was starting to feel something real for her fake boyfriend. The morning of Marcus's wedding arrived like a storm on the horizon. Zara stood in her small bathroom, staring at herself in the mirror. She'd splurged on a dress, navy blue, elegant but not flashy, the kind of dress that said she was doing just fine without saying anything at all. Her phone buzzed. "Dominic, car's outside. Ready to do this?" She took a deep breath. "Ready as I'll ever be." When she stepped outside her building, her breath caught. A sleek black Mercedes was idling at the curb, and leaning against it, looking like he'd stepped out of a magazine, was Dominic. Except this wasn't the casual Dominic from the dive bar or her couch. This was someone else entirely. He wore a charcoal gray suit that must have cost thousands of dollars, tailored so perfectly it looked like it had been painted onto his body. His hair was styled, his shoes gleamed like mirrors, and on his wrist was a watch that caught the morning light, a Patek Philippe that cost more than her entire year's salary. "Wow," Zara breathed, stopping in her tracks. "You really clean up." His smile was slow and devastating. "The role of devoted boyfriend has certain requirements." He opened the car door for her. "You look beautiful, by the way. That dress is perfect." The drive to the ferry terminal was quiet. They'd take the ferry to Martha's Vineyard, then a car to the venue. Marcus's family had rented out an entire estate for the weekend, because of course they had. On the ferry, standing at the rail with the wind whipping around them and the ocean stretching endlessly, Dominic took her hand. His palm was warm, his grip steady. "Whatever happens today," he said, "remember this. You're not the girl he left behind. You're the woman who survived, who built herself back up, who's about to show him exactly what he lost. And he paused, his thumb brushing across her knuckles. "I'm honored to stand next to you while you do it." Zara's throat tightened with emotion. "How are you real?" Something complicated crossed his face. Guilt, maybe. But before she could analyze it, they were docking, and the performance was about to begin. The venue was obscene, a historic waterfront estate with manicured gardens, a massive white tent set up overlooking the ocean, and guests in designer clothes sipping champagne like it was water. Zara felt desperately out of place until Dominic's hand found the small of her back, steady and sure. "Breathe," he murmured. "You belong here just as much as anyone." They made their way through the crowd. Marcus spotted them almost immediately, his eyes widening in shock. He hadn't actually believed she'd come. "Zara," he said, approaching with Simone trailing behind him, "you came, and you brought—" His eyes swept over Dominic, taking in the expensive suit, the watch, the quiet confidence that radiated from him like heat. "Your boyfriend." "Dominic Ashford," Dominic said, extending his hand. But this time something was different. When he said his full name, multiple heads turned. A woman nearby gasped softly. Marcus's face went pale. "Ashford," Marcus repeated slowly. "As in Ashford Restaurant Group? The Ashford?" "That's right," Dominic said calmly. Zara's world tilted. Her hand, which had been resting on Dominic's arm, went numb. Ashford Restaurant Group. She knew that name. Everyone in the industry knew that name. It was on the website, on the employee portal, on every single paycheck she'd ever received. "Wait," she said faintly, looking up at Dominic. "Ashford Restaurant Group. You're not just in the restaurant business. You own it," Marcus finished, and his voice was strangled. "He owns the Azure. He owns the entire chain, 47 restaurants." He looked at Zara with something like disbelief. "You're dating your boss. You're dating a billionaire." The word billionaire hit Zara like a physical blow. The ground beneath her feet felt unstable. She looked at Dominic, really looked at him, and suddenly everything made sense. The expensive clothes he pretended were normal, the way chefs treated him, the ease with which he moved through high-end restaurants, the watch, the car, all of it. "You knew," she whispered, "this whole time. You knew who I was. You've been coming to the Azure, letting me serve you, and you never said—" "Zara!" Dominic's voice was urgent, his hand reaching for her. But she stepped back, the betrayal crashing over her in waves. She'd told him everything. Her struggles, her debt, her dreams. She'd been vulnerable and raw and honest, and he'd been lying the entire time. "Excuse me," she said, her voice shaking. "I need some air." She walked away quickly, her heels sinking into the perfect lawn, her vision blurring with tears. Behind her, she heard Dominic say something sharp to Marcus, heard footsteps following her. But she didn't stop until she reached the edge of the property, where the perfectly manicured gardens gave way to wild beach grass, and the ocean stretched out forever. "Zara, please!" Dominic's voice behind her was wrecked. "Let me explain." She spun to face him, and the tears were falling freely now. "Explain what? That you lied to me? That you let me believe you were just some regular guy when you're actually a billionaire who owns the company I work for? Do you have any idea how humiliating this is?" "I didn't lie." "You didn't tell the truth. That's the same thing." Her voice broke. "I told you things I've never told anyone. I was vulnerable with you. And this whole time you were, what, slumming it? Getting a kick out of seeing how the poor waitress lives?" "No." The word came out fierce. Dominic closed the distance between them, his hands coming up to frame her face, forcing her to look at him. "Listen to me. Yes, I own the Azure. Yes, I should have told you sooner. But I didn't tell you because when I'm with you, Zara, you see me. Just me. Not my bank account, not my name, not what I can do for you. You're the first woman in 10 years who's looked at me like I'm a person instead of a prize. That's not fair. I've been coming to the Azure for 3 months," he continued, his voice raw. 3 months, Zara. Every week, sometimes twice a week, sitting at that bar just to watch you work, to see your smile, to hear your laugh. I was falling in love with you long before you kissed me." The confession hung in the air between them, devastating and impossible. "You don't love me," Zara whispered. "You don't even know me." "I know you better than anyone," Dominic said. "I know you're terrified of failing your mother's memory. I know you add an extra scoop of ice cream to desserts for kids who look sad. I know you count your tips 3 times before you leave because you're always afraid you miscounted. I know you dream in recipes and you cry at cooking shows, and you think you're not good enough when you're the most extraordinary person I've ever met." Zara's breath caught. Everything he said was true. Details he couldn't have known unless he'd been paying attention. Real attention. The kind that saw beneath the surface. "Why didn't you just tell me?" she asked, and her voice was so small. "Because I'm a coward," Dominic admitted. "Because I knew the moment you found out who I really was, everything would change. And I was right. Look at us. Look at your face. You don't see me anymore. You see my name, my money, the power imbalance." "Because there is one," Zara pulled away from him, wrapping her arms around herself. "You're my boss, Dominic. You could fire me with a phone call. You could destroy my career, my references, everything. And she laughed bitterly. "I let you into my life, my home, my dreams. God, I'm so stupid." "You're not stupid. You're human. And I never would use my position against you. You have to believe that." "I don't know what to believe anymore." Behind them, someone cleared their throat. They both turned to see Simone standing there, looking uncomfortable but determined. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she said, "but Marcus is looking for you both. The ceremony's about to start." She looked at Zara with something like sympathy. "For what it's worth, Marcus's family is losing their minds right now. His mother just Googled Dominic Ashford, and she looks like she's going to have a stroke. You showing up with him? It's the best revenge you could have possibly gotten." Zara let out a shaky laugh despite herself. "This isn't about revenge anymore." "No," Simone agreed, glancing at Dominic. "I don't think it ever was." She walked away, leaving them alone again. Dominic took a careful step toward Zara. "I understand if you want to leave. I'll have the car take you home, and you never have to see me again outside of work, which I'll also make sure you never have to do. I'll transfer your employment to a different location, different manager, whatever you want. But please, Zara, please believe me when I say that everything I feel for you is real. The money doesn't matter. The company doesn't matter. You matter." Zara looked at him, really looked at him, At the desperation in his eyes, the way his hands were clenched at his sides like he was physically restraining himself from reaching for her. At the way he was offering to let her go, even though it was clearly killing him. "I need time," she finally said. "I need to think. Take all the time you need. But I'm not leaving, not yet. I came here to face Marcus, and I'm going to do that, with or without you." "With me," Dominic said immediately. "If you'll let me, we can finish what we started. And then, when this is over, you can make your decision about us, about whether there can even be an us." Zara nodded slowly. "Okay. But Dominic, no more lies. No more half-truths. If we're doing this, I need complete honesty. I promise." They walked back to the ceremony together, the space between them charged with everything unsaid. As they took their seats, Zara felt dozens of eyes on them, curious, speculating, judging. Marcus kept glancing back at them from where he stood at the altar, his face tight with barely controlled emotion. The ceremony was beautiful and hollow. Marcus and Simone exchanged vows that sounded like they'd been written by a greeting card company. And through it all, Zara felt Dominic's presence beside her like a flame, burning and steady and impossible to ignore. During the reception, Marcus's mother cornered them by the bar. She was a tall, elegant woman with sharp eyes and a smile that didn't reach past her teeth. "So," she said, looking Zara up and down, "you've done quite well for yourself, haven't you? I always knew you were ambitious, but landing Dominic Ashford?" She laughed, and it was not a kind sound. "Well played." Before Zara could respond, Dominic's arm slid around her waist, pulling her against his side in a gesture of blatant possession. "Mrs. Chen," he said, his voice pleasant but with steel underneath, "I'm afraid you have it backwards. I'm the one who got lucky. Your son, on the other hand." He glanced toward Marcus, who was watching them from across the room. "He's going to spend the rest of his life wondering what his life would have been like if he'd been smart enough to appreciate what he had." Mrs. Chen's smile faltered. Dominic leaned down to whisper in Zara's ear, his lips brushing against her skin. "Dance with me?" And right there, in the middle of Marcus's wedding reception, everything was about to change. But before we get to the moment that will absolutely wreck you emotionally, you need to do something. If you're watching this without being subscribed, what are you even doing? Hit that subscribe button right now. Tap the notification bell. Because what happens next is the reason this story has destroyed millions of people's sleep schedules. And drop a comment. Would you forgive someone who lied about being a billionaire? Would you walk away from someone who saw the real you, even if they hid who they really were? Because Zara is about to make a choice that will define everything. And honestly, there's no right answer here.